Hello, and thanks again for joining us for Monday's edition of Alaska Weather on the 22nd day of February 2021. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, there's this weather graphic. Not a lot on it today. A couple areas there. Upper Yukon Valley, the Yukon Flats area, Fort Yukon, Chalkyitsik, Beaver, those areas. Winter weather advisory out until, let's see, midnight Tuesday, which would be tonight, or actually until, Tuesday, or into at least through tonight. Let's just call it tonight. There for winds gusting 40 miles an hour, maybe an additional 1 to 3 inches of snow. So the new snow and those winds will reduce visibilities under half mile at times. And then also a winter weather advisory for the Kuskokwim Delta to Nunivak Island. And that's, again, for tonight, east winds, or winds gusting to 30 miles an hour and blowing snow with some snow there, the system coming in. That's going to result in, again, reduced visibilities at times in blowing snow. And that's it for the watches, warnings, advisories around the state. On the satellite imagery, you can see the batch of clouds coming in, bringing gusty winds and rain to the eastern Aleutians and Pribilofs, or increasing moisture there. But definitely warmer temperatures riding in with that system from southwest to northeast. That's going to be coming into the southwest coast there. Otherwise, over the eastern interior, the upper Yukon Valley, kind of under the influence of that Arctic low and another disturbance dropping southeastward there. And that's also affecting the Arctic coast at times with passing areas of light snow and a little bit of a pickup in the wind, and it clears out, but all the amounts not much at all. Nikolai today picked up about ½ an inch of snow. That was one of the heavier snowfall amounts I could find today, and they were after they hit a low this morning of 41 degrees below zero. They're now about 15 below. So warming up a little bit there, and the snow pretty much ended. And then a convective pattern over the eastern North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle, numerous showers there. Wind's not too bad though, and showers you can see starting to taper off. The last looks like one of the last of the potent troughs having moved through and now into Canada, but still some showers extending short distance off the coast, but they'll all be diminishing, but probably won't end completely during the night tonight or even tomorrow. Otherwise, clearing out with north or offshore flow, north winds, west gusting to about 45 miles an hour, Passage Canal this afternoon. And Seward seeing winds out of the north with clear skies gusting to 44 miles an hour. And then just to the west of Resurrection Bay, Peterson Lagoon, that had the top wind gust there of 57 miles an hour. So those north winds did pick up, but then they'll probably diminish later tonight as the ridge shifts eastward. Otherwise, some clouds are around Kodiak Island, and not too bad. Bristol Bay kind of clearing out a little bit, and really areas of light snow or snow showers across the interior, and areas real light, really nothing more than a ½ an inch or ½ of an inch, if that. And on the chart, there's that front pushing the rain and snow into the Pribilof Islands and rain into the eastern Aleutians. Warm front extending some moisture into the Alaska Peninsula there. The main low center farther back to the west, 985 millibars. Western Aleutians, high pressure, colder high pressure, and the gradient between the high and the trough in the eastern North Gulf Coast. And that's what's kicking those winds up along the Kenai Peninsula today, especially the western Prince William Sound and the channeled areas of the south coast of the Kenai Peninsula. Had winds gusting to about 30 miles an hour at Homer with some light snow. Those also should start to come down. And the Panhandle, rain and snow today with the rain or the snow at the higher elevations. And the Arctic coast, again, a couple of weak troughs skirting, bringing some skiffs of light snow to the area up there. And for tonight, that'll continue. Not much change up there through tonight, passing areas of light snow or flurries. But again, negligible accumulations. High pressure builds into the interior and clears it out. I don't know if it'll be to the extent I'm showing here, but it'll definitely be dry with light winds, drier, and maybe some lingering flurries, but nothing significant. Rain and snow showers continue for the Panhandle. And now snow moves into the southwest coast, and rain for the Alaska Peninsula, warming temperatures at first low there, 991, driving warmer air northward into the northern Bering Sea. And then for tomorrow, that whole system washes out, the main low center hanging back over the southern Bering Sea. But you can see a new one there making the scene just well south of Kodiak Island coming onto the map, and you'll see that turns into a pretty intense storm with gale and storm force winds into the eastern Gulf of Alaska and along the coast of the Panhandle, going 45 knots for the winds for much of the southeast coast for full gales, and even into Clarence Strait for Wednesday afternoon. Otherwise, snow and snow showers pretty widespread over the central and southern interior. It stays drier and colder to the north. Next system pushing another front into the across the southern Bering Sea and to the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula by afternoon. And for the lows tonight, below zero, south central Alaska, 5 above to 10 below, about 15 below Copper River Basin. Lower 20s northern Panhandle, lower 30s to the south, lower 20s Kodiak Island. Single numbers for Bristol Bay. Well below zero again in the interior, north of the Alaska Range, 20 to 45 below, and well below zero for St. Lawrence Island, just under freezing for the Pribilofs, but near 40, the lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians with that mild southerly flow. Highs tomorrow near 40, Kodiak Island, teens, south central Alaska, Single Numbers, Copper River Basin, 35 to 40 over the Panhandle, and nudging above zero there, the eastern Upper Tanana Valley, Fairbanks to Northway, and staying below zero back to the north, but not quite as far below. And 30s, Bristol Bay, near 40 over the areas of the Aleutians, lower 40s, Alaska Peninsula, and milder, just a shade below zero, Copper River Basin, lows in the teens, 10 to 15, south central Alaska, and 20 to 30 below, northern interior to the Arctic coast, and upper 20s out over the Bering Sea.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic Tuesday morning, a band of IFR there along the north slope and the Arctic coast from about Point Lay on eastward, marginal VFR for the northwest coast, and Noatak Valley, Koyukuk Valley, Yukon Flats, right on down into the almost to the Alaska Range, central and eastern areas, so into the greater Fairbanks area, but then VFR, Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, lower Yukon River Valley, lower mid-area Yukon River Valley there, right in down to Cook Inlet, North Gulf Coast, marginal for the Panhandle, but notice the IFR of that front and the moisture pushing into the southwest coast and as far east as, or at least Dillingham, possibly King Salmon, and then marginal VFR for the Aleutians and marginal VFR into Kodiak Island, and then for the afternoon, that area makes quite a jog to the northeast, bringing IFR right up into the central interior there, about Tanana. Marginal VFR just west of Fairbanks, and then Susitna, Matanuska Valley, becoming marginal VFR Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, and trying to get probably holding up around the Talkeetnas there, and IFR actually spilling into western Cook Inlet area in the afternoon. IFR Alaska Peninsula. Patch of IFR over the northern Bering Sea, marginal for St. Lawrence Island. IFR holds over the Arctic coast, most of it, and the north slope, with VFR in the eastern interior. Marginal VFR kind of improving there over the Panhandle slowly. But going back to marginal VFR by Wednesday morning for the southeast coast, and a big area of IFR now across southern Alaska from the Copper River Basin, Prince William Sound, right across Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, all the southwest coast, Kuskokwim Valley, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta area, and then some VFR coming in between two systems there, right over the Pribilofs to the eastern Aleutians, and then a narrow band of IFR at the next front for Adak-Atka, bending back around to Shimmy and Attu, and still some IFR holding up over the north slope, mainly the western Arctic coast, and then VFR in between that zone and farther to the south. Afternoon, that area holds, becomes a little bit better up there. VFR in the increase along the central eastern Beaufort Sea coast, marginal for the north slope, south of the Brooks Range, a little area of VFR there. Central interior right on down to the North Gulf Coast, Gulf of Alaska into the Panhandle. Solid IFR for the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, back up to Norton Sound with marginal VFR out over the Bering Sea and Aleutians. Some areas of VFR showing up as well. And for Anaktuvik, IFR flying conditions tomorrow, especially on the northern entrance, possibly better to the south, and that goes for Adigan as well. And Lake Clark and Merrill, just look for a downward trend in conditions throughout the day. Just go VFR becoming IFR by some point in the afternoon. better chance of it the later it gets. Ceilings visibility's coming down, and same pattern for rainy, starting out pretty good and then coming down to IFR in the afternoon. And for windy, VFR only becoming marginal VFR. They're a little too far to the east yet for any IFR. Isabel stays nice. Eastern Alaska range pretty good. Both Isabel and Tasta VFR through tomorrow afternoon into early evening. Tanita VFR becoming marginal probably by midday, maybe a little earlier. Depends how fast the moisture comes in. And Portage, same trend, VFR becoming marginal. And Chilkoot and White, both marginal VFR. Freezing levels, 2,000 to 4,000 feet. They're a little nudging northward across the Alaska Peninsula, but not too far to the north, southern Kodiak Island. And at the surface, eastern North Gulf Coast cutting across the Panhandle, back north of the Pribilofs there, but south of St. Matthew Island. And icing-wise, that moisture coming in the first round, we'll bring some isolated moderate rime icing into the western southwest interior, back to Togiak, Kuskokwim Bay, and then across the Alaska Peninsula. And another batch from about St. Paul, St. George Island into the northern Bering Sea. Otherwise, that's about it icing-wise tomorrow. And for the jet stream, ridging into the Gulf of Alaska, kind of moving through, so we're into southwest flow now. Of course, that's warmer flow with more moisture with the upper level low over the central Bering Sea there. 105 knot southwest winds at jet stream level for the Alaska Peninsula, and about 95 over the southeast interior and Panhandle. And at 9,000 feet, 55 knot winds there coming close to the Pribilofs over the eastern southeast Bering Sea there with that low, and then west-southwest 40 to 60 knots across southern Alaska, turn more west-northwest and lighter for the Panhandle, 3,000 feet. Maybe 40 knot winds, a little area there in the west central interior, but that mostly out over the Bering Sea, the 40 knot winds, light everywhere else. Turbulence-wise, not much to consider. Northern Bering Sea, light to isolated moderate chop, as well as the Fox Islands, Alaska Peninsula, western areas, Adak and Atka.
When I first started working here in the early 90s, this is where the glacier was. I mean, where we're walking right now would have been a pile of gravel that had been pushed up by the glacier, and then we would have had 100 to 200 foot high cliffs of ice right here. And as you can see, that's changed quite a bit. And if you look at that in 2 dimensions, you can sort of see the terminus used to be here, now it's back there. That gives you one measure. What that kind of 2-dimensional look doesn't show is how much mass has been lost, that the glacier has just sort of deflated. These 200-foot cliffs of ice have disappeared and pulled back to this gentle sloping glacier you see now.
When I was working in Kenai Fjords National Park, I used the topographic maps to navigate where I was, and I realized that the mapping of the glaciers was really off. The glaciers had receded a lot. There were new rivers and lakes that were establishing where the ice used to be or should have been according to the maps. And so then I did a study on this and found out that we had a 5% loss of glacier ice mass in the Kenai Fjords area between 1950 and 1985. Big change.
You know, one of the most compelling things we do, though, to document glacier change is simply take photographs. We've had repeat photography projects here at the park. They may not give you the most accurate data in terms of how much mass or real specific measurements, but what they do give you is a visual representation that can't be argued with. I mean, it really requires no interpretation.
Understanding what's happening, understanding these processes, and possibly being able to predict what's going to happen in the future is the best that we can do, and that requires science and research.
There's considerable research on climate change in Alaska. The most significant, I would say right now, is the Natural Resources Inventory and Monitoring Program, which is looking at change across a wide variety of vital signs or indicators.
Kenai Fjords National Park is actually a pretty good representation of what's going on globally with regards to glacier ice retreat. There have been studies showing that mountain glaciers are retreating all over the planet. There are probably well over 90% of the glaciers are in retreat status. There are a few that are advancing and some are holding their terminus point. But at Kenai Fjords, the tidewater glaciers are retreating more dramatically, but even the land-based glaciers in the terminus positions are retreating. It's pretty common for all the mountain glaciers. The big mountain glaciers in Wrangell St. Elias National Park, they're mostly in retreat too. We're really entering an interesting phase where what we call the cryosphere, the ice on the planet, is melting.
You know, in the more immediate past, it's clear that since the Pleistocene, glaciers have been retreating. So the idea that glaciers retreat is nothing, is no revelation. They've been retreating from across North America for the last 10,000 years. What appears to have changed and what has people's attention is the rate at which they're retreating. In the case of Exit Glacier, you know, we have scientists who've been looking at it. We have evidence that the glaciers left behind, or we can track that retreat for about the last 200 years. And we can say with confidence that in the last decade, that rate has increased.
Terminus mapping is a great way to map a small portion of the ice field. We come out twice a year and we use a GPS to walk the edge of the terminus and map the farthest extent of Exit Glacier. And that allows us to see what type of changes are occurring over the winter accumulation period and the summer ablation period. With that data, that can help us as we witness these changes within the ice field, we can hopefully be able to correlate that with the weather data that we have.
You know, when you look at an ice field that's 750 square miles, when you look at a glacier that towers hundreds of feet high, you get a sense of permanence. You think these things are massive, they're somehow a permanent sort of feature, and yet in a very short period of time, in a matter of a couple of decades, we've seen dramatic change in those things.
At Exit Glacier, we have a time-lapse camera set up on the glacier that allows us to take a couple photos every single day, and then to put that sequence of photos into a video where we can see changes of the glacier and the vegetation phenology throughout an entire year.
Virtually all the glaciers in Alaska are receding. Some glaciers are moving forward. That's not an indication that they're actually growing in size. It's just the rate at which they're slipping down the mountain.
In some cases, some of these glaciers are receding back up onto land, and so they're producing less ice. When you change the glacier systems, you're changing habitat for marine mammals and other wildlife. And the populations of harbor seals have dropped dramatically in the fjords. In 1980, shortly after the establishment of the park, in Island Bay, we had maybe 1,500 harbor seals. Nowadays, you know, it's a few hundred.
In Arctic environments, much of the sunlight that reaches the Earth bounces back because it hits snow and reflects off into space, or ice on the ocean and reflects off into space. That's the albedo effect. When the snow thaws and instead you have rock or vegetation, or when the ice thaws and you have transparent ocean, the sunlight will convert to other wavelengths. It'll convert essentially to warmth. That does not bounce back into the atmosphere as much. So consequently, you get a warming of the ocean, you get a warming of the ground, you get a thawing of frozen soils or permafrost, you get a more rapid thawing of sea ice. So once the ice and once the snow is off of the surface, the rate of warming increases considerably.
If you're driving out to Exit Glacier, you'll actually start to see signs along the side of the road that have dates on them. Visitors sometimes are confused. They think they're elevations or something until they get up to the glacier and realize, oh, those were all date signs along the road that were telling me when the glacier was there. Another thing that's been happening in the Exit Glacier area in recent years is this flooding that comes at a time we're not used to. We're used to having maybe some flooding in the fall when we have a lot of heavy rain. This has suddenly been some flooding that's coming in the middle of the summer, usually not associated with precipitation events. It's associated with warmer weather and melting. When you walk down one of our trails that leads to Exit Glacier, there are a number of ways to get out there, but what used to be the main route is no longer really the main route because of the way the glacier has changed. So this main route to the glacier used to provide dramatic views of the glacier as you walk towards it. In fact, there was a large kiosk built at the end of this trail for people to stop and rest and enjoy the view of the glacier. Now, if they stop and rest at this kiosk, people think, why did the park put a kiosk here? Because it looks out at some shrubs. And there's no glacier within view anymore.
The way we solve big problems like this is not all at once. There's a thing called the Sokolov's wedges, and you just take a little bite of the pie, one sliver at a time. So we try to do incremental changes.
When we talk to people about our concerns about climate change, about the changes that are happening to the glacier, we also want to leave them with some idea of what we're doing to mitigate some of the effects of climate change. For example, here at the park, as we retire vehicles out of our fleet, we try to replace them with electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles. We've done things like at the Glacier Nature Center, helping to sort of experiment and install a cutting-edge fuel cell, as opposed to running some traditional power source out there that relies on some sort of more greenhouse-producing gas.
My main hope for the future is that people get the message that the planet is changing fairly rapidly in places, particularly places like Kenai Fjords National Park, and that it is, we think, there's good evidence it's a result of atmospheric changes, which are measured in terms of human inputs into the atmosphere.
The rapid rate at which these glaciers are changing now offers us the opportunity to talk about this place as a way of looking into the future. In a lot of parts of the country, climate change issues are a little more subtle. And we can point here and say, look how fast this is changing. This is what the future holds for perhaps a lot of us and a lot of the planet as climate continues to change.
I'm optimistic that people and nature will adapt to change, but my expectation is that change will occur. Time will tell.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Coastal water forecast. Small advisories along the coastline of the Panhandle there out of the west. 25 knots, seas around 18 feet. Lighter winds over the inside waters. Central and northern areas south of 15 3-foot seas, and Clarence Strait southeast at 15 with 7-foot seas, and then the eastern North Gulf Coast looking at southwest breeze at about 15 knots. And for Wednesday, that increases dramatically, almost up to storm force winds. Maybe a period of that, but for the most part right now, the 45-knot westerlies about covers it pretty good. Out of the westerlies, west winds at 45 knots. Seas just under 20 or just under 30 feet. Near 30 feet in the south coast and about 24 feet in the north coast, so the winds will be southeast at 40 knots. Southerlies at 15 for Lynn Canal, pick it up to 20 knots for Stevens Passage, and then also gales for Clarence Strait. West winds coming up to 40 knots with 8-foot seas. For northern Cook Inlet, light northeast breeze tomorrow at 10 knots, 20 knots south of the Forelands, east 20 for Kamishak Bay, Barren Island south 20 knots, North Gulf Coast south to southeast 20 knots, 8 to 11-foot seas, and east winds at 15 for Prince William Sound. Those will increase to north 30 knots for Prince William Sound on Wednesday, and storm warnings for the eastern North Gulf Coast, Middleton Island zone, northeast sustained 50 knots, 18-foot seas, gale warnings western North Gulf Coast, northerlies at 35 knots, and northwest 30 for the Barren Islands, and north 30 for southern Cook Inlet. Kamishak Bay, though, gale warnings, northwest 35, 10-foot seas, and northeast of 15 for northern Cook Inlet. Kodiak Island, south to southwest breeze tomorrow, or wind, 20 knots, 4 to 9-foot seas. And from Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev, south 25 knots, 10 to 12-foot seas. Bering Sea side of the peninsula, southerlies to 30 knots with 7-foot seas, and southeast at 20 with 5-foot seas from Bristol Bay. And for Wednesday, Alaska Peninsula, gale warnings, southwest 35 knots, Sitkinak to Castle Cape, west at 35 knots, and 40-knot winds out of the west on the east side of Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait, Bristol Bay, southwest winds at 30 knots, 7 to 8-foot seas. And for the western Aleutians, Shimia to Kiska, northwest 25 knots, and 30-knot winds there from Kiska in along the Adak-Atka area on the Bering Sea side of the islands. at 30 knots, but gale warnings for the zone on the Pacific side for 35-knot southwest winds, 20-foot seas. Small craft advisories for the Fox Islands, south to southwest, 25 to 30 knots, seas running 7 to 17 feet. And then for Wednesday, Unmac and Unalaska Islands, southwest 35 knots. AKwx, southwest 35 knots. Amchitka, southwest 35 knots. Seas all under 20 feet, say 12 to 18 feet, and gale warnings for Kiska, Shimi, and Attu for south winds 35 knots and 21-foot seas. For the southwest coast, Kuskokwim Delta coastline there, south of Nunivak Island, small craft advisory, south 25 knots. St. Matthew Island, east 25 knots, and the Pribilof southeast at 20 with 8-foot seas. St. Lawrence Island, brisk wind advisory for east winds at 30 knots, and Norton Sound, brisk wind advisory east at 25. And those will become northeast, 25 to 30 knots from Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island for brisk wind advisories. Now will extend down along the Yukon Delta coast to north side of Nunivak Island, north 25, northeast 30 for St. Matthew Island, Pribilof, St. George, St. Paul, southwest at 30, and the southwest coast there into Kuskokwim Bay, southwest 25. And for the Beaufort Sea coast there, kind of variable on the central coast, east side, west winds 15 to 20 knots, southwest 15 on the western Arctic coast, and light west breeze from Cape Beaufort, Cape Thompson, northeast 15, Cape Thompson to Wales. And for Wednesday, Wales to Cape Thompson, north 20, and then Cape Thompson up to, say, Point Lay, east-northeast 25 for brisk wind advisory, central and eastern Arctic coast, not too bad. East winds at about 15 knots, pretty uniform with directions out of the east. And for tonight, high pressure builds in, may not clear out to the extent that I've got that big sand trap drawn over the interior, but definitely the winds will be light and it should be dry. Any flurries will be negligible and probably up along the Arctic coast, best chance, but big change coming into the southwest there across the Bering Sea, warmer and more moisture, and still unsettled for the Panhandle, but that'll improve tomorrow slowly. And you can see the moisture, snow pushing into the southwest interior, Kuskokwim Valley, into the western Alaska Range, and then another big storm into the northeast Pacific there, southeast Gulf of Alaska for gale and storm force winds, probably in the afternoon and evening with rain on the increase, heavy at times, and then another system not quite as strong out over the eastern Aleutians. That's all I've got time for tonight. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.